Richard Lloyd mentioned around that time that they weren't amazing musicians, but that they had the will to become great. And that, gentlemen, was the problem with the chop. Welcome to 1001 Album Complaints, the show where lifelong friends, musicians, and obnoxious bar conversation makers get together to research and tell the story behind some of the most influential albums ever made, as chronicled in Robert Dimery's book, 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You Die. Now, let's get a couple things straight here. We're going to go deep on this record today, but we're going to take you along with us, holding your hand every step of the way. We're going to tell the backstory, we're going to play clips to help you understand what the heck we're talking about, and we're going to dissect a few key songs and tell you what's working and what's not. And at the end of all that, we're going to vote on whether you really need to hear this album before you die. Now, if you're a regular listener, thank you and welcome back. If you're new here, I want to issue our standard disclaimer now. We're all musicians ourselves, we're fans of music, and thus we have the utmost respect for the craft of making albums. It is challenging on so many levels, and we automatically appreciate really anyone who puts the time and effort into doing it. However, we also love to pick apart what we enjoy, nitpicking the nuances and complaining about various imagined decision points along the way. So fair warning, we shall not be treating this album with any particular reverence, but instead, we'll be making fun of it consistently, as is our wont. With love, of course.
Love for the sons of Delaware. That's right.
That's right. I'm Rob. I've been in love with music my entire life. I've spent countless hours playing, writing, and recording music in the last 2+ decades, and I have a microphone here in front of me, so that means you're about to get my opinions. Now, if you're a returning listener, you probably know that we normally randomly select our week's album and then chat with each other through the cold, unfeeling portal we call the internet. But tonight is different.
Oh, yeah.
Tom, Phil, and I are together in person, and not just in person, but in our home state of Delaware.
That's right.
And in celebration of that rare occasion, we have chosen a Delaware musical classic in television's Marquee Moon. I can already hear you screaming that CBGB's is located in New York, and how dare we, and such, but never you mind. Never you mind. Barry and Levon are going to explain everything here tonight in due time as we dive into a record from a band that had the following written about them in an early review. The great thing about the band is that they have no musical or socially redeeming characteristics, and they know it.
Wow.
I'm talking, of course, about television's landmark release Marquee Moon, and that is a band that had the good sense to use that quote on their show flyers from that point on.
Who gave us that quote? That's a great quote.
Yeah, some random New York reviewer.
Yeah, all right, there we go.
It's cutting edge to use that negative feedback as your advertisement.
Well, as we're going to hear, I think television did go on quite a journey as a band. They were a band for a long time before we get to the debut album in Marquee Moon, and so they did go through some evolution in that time. So it is possible they were likely, in fact, that they were a bit of a different band when they started, and hence got that review. So to get everyone situated, let's kick things off with a clip of the title track on this release. It is called Marquee. As we like to do, we are going to introduce ourselves by way of a tweet-length review. We're going to go extra mean, extra snarky before we get into the nuances of our opinions. Here, let's hear first from Tom.
Thank you, Rob. Tom Verlaine and television write one of the defining concept albums of the 70s. That concept? What if we just made all the choruses really shitty?
Next up, let's hear from Phil.
Round but angular, historic, but nobody really cares. Of course, we're talking about Delaware, the hometown of Tom Verlaine, and all three of today's podcast hosts.
Nice. And I am Rob, as I said, and my tweet-length review is, get these boys a hot meal. Jesus, they're so malnourished, they forgot to write more than one song.
Oh, wow. Different times, Rob.
With that out of the way, though, let's get into our general, and dare I say actual, impressions of this record. How was your week, Tom?
And the album's pretty great, I gotta say. You're right, it's a little samey. They have that problem again where it seems like all the knobs got stuck on their amps and they just sort of have the same sound on the guitars throughout it. But generally speaking, I thought that the songs are interesting. They have a bit of an anti-hook thing going on. I sort of referenced that in my tweet. The choruses are absolutely terrible on most of these songs. They they didn't try.
I would say sometimes it's a little hard to tell where the chorus even is.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, so they're not trying to write pop, and they succeed in not writing pop. But they write some really awesomely meandering songs and some songs that are tighter than you would think that they would be. I don't know if I would say biggest issue with it, but I kept reading about how this was a seminal release of the punk era, and I got no punk whatsoever from this at all.
Yes, we're going to untangle that in the backstory, of course, but you're right. They are strongly, strongly associated with the CBGB scene in New York City in the late 70s, the same club that birthed bands like Ramones and Blondie and Talking Heads, and was seen as a center to the New York punk movement. And yet, this doesn't really sound anything like punk.
No, they're generally too good at their instruments to be in a punk band.
By far, I would say.
I mean, when Talking Heads were breaking out, they were considered, right, punk, right, new wave.
It's more art rock, which I think Talking Heads also applies to them.
Art rock is a better way to describe it.
And I think in those, what we're going to find in the story, right, is in those early days, punk was more of an umbrella term for new stuff, for stuff that was pushing back against what was popular and just sort of insular. And like a lot of movements had a lot more room under its tent in the beginning.
Yeah.
But I want to give you my take because I was mean and it was hard to be mean. This is a 10 of 10 record for me.
Oh, okay.
This is an amazing record. In my mind, it is a 10 of 10. But I have to admit that this week was kind of about going in and trying to figure out why I thought that. In other words, that was the impression I had of it. I've listened to it many, many times in the past, but not with this intensity of feeling like we do in our exercise. And I just think it has so much personality. To our point, it just doesn't sound like anything else. And Phil, you alluded to it in your tweet, it's full of paradoxes. It's nerdy and cool at the same time. It's nervous and confident at the same time.
I agree. It is full of paradoxes. It also sounds oddly modern still. Like if you pop this on and said, this is the new Wilco record, I'd be like, okay, right? Like I would totally be buying it until
Be like, hey, the Strokes got really good at their instruments all of a sudden. and they put an album out.
totally.
Definitely, you can see those through lines on through too. I definitely referenced the Strokes in some of my comments, but I think a lot of modern rock bands are taking cues here. And we've already hit on it, right? But it's a sort of proto-punk because when they're writing and originally performing and arranging most of these songs, it's a couple years, some of them, before the debut record actually comes out, right? So they're kind of from the mid-'70s or even trending towards the early 70s versus when the record comes out in 1977. And so in that sense, it's kind of proto-punk. And yet you have 10-minute songs with dueling guitar solos.
Yeah. And, I don't know who told Tom Verlaine that he could sing. I'm glad that they did.
Yeah.
But he does not have a voice that I'm immediately like, you're the lead singer. There we go.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. He has a lot of character, both in the sound of his voice and his delivery and his lyrical choices, but that's a little slightly different lane. But I also agree. He does not have a quintessentially beautiful voice. And I do think, again, I feel like this makes a little space for David Byrne. I feel like if you've heard this makes David Byrne a little more palatable, right? A little more mainstream, a little more. He's also going to be writing choruses. So
there we go. Trying to actually write catchy songs.
Absolutely. And I don't know, this may very well be apocryphal, but the timeline fits that there was a story that David Byrne saw television at an early CBGB's gig and was like, damn, I have to start a band.
Oh, that's awesome.
I mean, that definitely makes sense. I hear it, and then I also understand the through line contextually.
But, this is something that I feel like our audience has probably rightfully given a shit about in the past with his voice, where ultimately what was so special about a time like this, when any new scene is developing, when a new genre of music is being birthed, it creates an environment where people can be a little more vulnerable and stretch the bounds of what is acceptable. So I don't think it's a coincidence that you could say the same thing about some of the punk vocalists coming out of the same scene. We might not like what the end product as much, ultimately a scene is trying to create safety for people to experiment.
Yeah. Well said.
My experience with this album previously had been as a car album. I listened to this a lot in the car on longer drives, and this was honestly the first time that I had sat down and given a careful listen in headphones, and there was a lot more going on than one would initially think when you hear it in an environment where there's background noise and stuff. There's a lot more precision and care going on in the recording, and just in general, I thought that it was more layered than I was expecting it to be.
I totally agree. I wrote down also that it was ugly in a beautiful way. It has this element, and this is what I think ties it to that punk scene in a way that we can understand, where everything is jagged edges.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just so angular, and nothing about it is smooth or simple.
I also think what's interesting about it is this is a sonic thing, but I also think something we've seen on the podcast before. This was very well received in the UK, not as well received in the US. I also, and I'll save it for when we get to the songs, I also think this has through lines to some 60s guitar legends and 60s guitar greatness that don't really seem apparent on face value. But, we can get into it when we get to the songs. But I think there's some California hippie bands that these kind of, there's a through line here, right?
Interesting.
Yeah. I heard a lot of through lines vocally, and this might sound like an off-the-wall comment at first, to Mick Jagger, in that it was almost attitude first. And he's not a bad singer, but he's singing with a lot of attitude in the way that Mick Jagger does not have. Nobody's booking Mick Jagger for precision background vocals or anything like that. He just comes with a lot of attitude.
A lot of confidence.
Yeah, a lot of confidence. Yeah.
I hadn't thought of the Rolling Stones or Mick Jagger comp in all the years I've been listening to this, but I did read that in some of the early contemporary reviews where they were referencing the Rolling Stones, and then once they said that started to make sense to me.
Yeah, there was a particular song that we're going to talk about where that's what flipped the switch for me, where I was doing a careful listen. I was like, where does this fit in my general categorization? And I was like, oh, yeah, there's a lot of Mick Jagger going on here.
I hear that.
And I would say that his vocals are kind of very much like the rest of the band. I don't think that you would listen to any of these individual instrumentalists and be like, top of the craft. These guys are absolute killers, but they're just doing the right thing.
I agree with that.
Yeah, they all have taste, and I think they know what they want. I think that's a good segue for us to start telling the story of television and making as many references to our beautiful home state of Delaware as possible. In the process, before we get to that story, we're going to take a short break. And we are back. Now, first up, apart from doing a deep dive on the internet into reviews and interviews and some fan-made documentaries, for this show I wanted to mention that I also read the 33 1/3 about Marquee Moon specifically, so a lot of my story is going to be citing that version.
Those are really fantastic, by the way. Every one of those 33 1/3 I've read is just,
you know what? I feel like we don't talk about it enough on the show. I have a slightly different opinion. I think they're always interesting. I have read several of them. I think they're of varying quality, but they're always taking chances. They're always teaching me something, but there's not really a format for them.
I agree there's not a format. I read one about the band's songs from the Big Pink that was practically fiction. It was written in from a very strange point of view.
The nerd in me would rather it be a literal studio diary every single time.
Yeah. VH1's making the record.
And give me every bit of detail, and it almost never is that. And honestly, this wasn't either. This focused on the surrounding scene quite a bit, but it gave some context. So I do generally recommend the series, but I think the quality bar changes. In any case, I wanted to cite that and call that out and maybe even have that conversation we just had. So, as we've been saying, you cannot tell the story of the band Television without simultaneously telling the story of the legendary rock club in New York's Bowery neighborhood, CBGB's. This place holds a near mythic status in the rock canon, but for those who might not know, this became ground zero for the hip music scene of New York in the 70s with previously mentioned bands like Blondie, Talking Heads, the Ramones, Patti Smith, and of course, Television.
None of the musical styles referenced in the name.
No, not at all. We're going to get to that. So given all that, here is a possibly apocryphal story about how our band tonight, Television, and CBGB's are linked from the very beginning. The bar used to be called Hilly's, after its owner, Hilly Crystal. But one day, he decides to rebrand it.
Hilly Crystal? Yeah.
That's right. And apparently, Hilly is literally up on the ladder installing the new sign, the one that reads CBGB's, when two young guys walk by, ask what the new name means. Now, Tom alluded to it. Hilly tells them that it stands for, wait for it, country, bluegrass, and blues. There are also other letters we don't even need to get into because they make even less sense. And the two kids zing back with, oh yeah, that's exactly what we play. We play all those things, even though they clearly do not. Can we get a gig? Now, those youngsters are Tom Verlaine and Richard Hell of Television, and this band fits none of those genre categories, but stage time. And that is the story of the band's first gig.
First gig, CBGB.
Yeah.
Good for them.
Yeah, because it had literally just opened. Hilly was skeptical, and he opts to give them the worst night of the week, which my former bandmates certainly know is...
Monday? Tuesday?
Sunday.
Sunday?
Yeah.
Yeah, Sunday.
Otherwise completely dead. But he lets them play every Sunday for a while because they bring friends, and those friends buy booze, and more people start to come, and eventually Hilly kins to the fact that more outsider bands ought to get booked at the club.
So, just a tip for any aspiring musicians out there: become friends with alcoholics. It will definitely help your gigging.
So true. So in this version of the story, at least, and I do think there's a little bit of debate about this, but certainly Television were at CBGB's from a very early stage and helped build the club being cool in the first place. But okay, let's go way back. Before all that, we have to go back several years and about 125 miles away. That's 200 kilometers for all the non-American listeners. To another haven of talent, sadly unheralded and unsung, the place from which all great art springs, the one location on this beautiful planet we can all agree is magical and unique. I'm talking about Delaware.
I thought you were going to go all the way back to like Caesar Rodney making the...
Hold on, I shall continue.
Oh,
That's right. We're talking about the Diamond State, the deformed baby arm-shaped, broken away from Pennsylvania colony whose delegates elbowed their way to the front of the line to sign the Declaration of Independence first, and still the place where U.S. dead soldiers are shipped back to. That's the Delaware I'm talking about, baby. And yes, I will be continuing. Proud birthplace of every single one of your humble complainers, plus Aubrey Plaza, George Thorogood, Ryan Felipe, Oscar nominee Elizabeth Shue, and Billy Ficca, the drummer on this record. He's the only one actually born in Delaware.
I was gonna say. I'm pretty sure Alan wasn't born in Delaware.
What?
Yeah.
I mean, he's summered here long enough. He's definitely
Sure,
in.
sure.
I mean,
It's definitely going to come up on his performance review.
all the good complainers are from Delaware. I think he might have been born in... Was he born in California?
that's what I believe.
The whole world's topsy-turvy. So, listen, I know you thought I was going to say Tom Verlaine was born in Delaware. Technically, he was born across the river in New Jersey, and he moved to Delaware around age 6. But we are claiming him anyway.
You know, I like in the Wikipedia, it says born in New Jersey, but his origin is Delaware.
Hell yeah.
He wasn't online yet. Dude.
No.
He was still baking.
But even more importantly, the initial seeds of Television, the band, are sown right here in Wilmington, Delaware, when one Richard Myers and one Tom Miller meet at Sanford Private High School. Now, some years later, these two would take on the stage names and become Tom Verlaine and Richard Hell. Side note, we're all from Wilmington, Delaware, but none of our parents made enough money to send us to Sanford.
Definitely not.
No, definitely not. That's got to be, what, 40-some grand a year these days?
That's probably about right.
Yeah.
Another side note is Rob, finally got to feel the wild dopamine surge our UK listeners get just about every week when I heard a handful of television, the band acolytes, mispronounce the place where Sanford School is located as Hockessin.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
It's Hockessin, guys. Come on, do your research.
If there's one thing you should know about the Mid-Atlantic accent is that we're going to stretch that O. We get you a Hockessin.
Because you mispronounced that word, everything else you said is invalid in my
Rehoboth,
eyes.
for sure. Yeah.
And you've shown yourself to be a loser who doesn't do any work at all on your product. I'm kidding. No one cares how to pronounce your backwater town name, and our own is no exception. I'm honestly glad that YouTubers didn't waste their time looking up that stupid detail. Did you hear me, listeners? So Tom grows up playing jazz sax, but he's struggling to fit in high school.
Jazz sax wasn't just landing with all the chicks? God damn.
I don't know if you can sense it from the pictures, but he's not very sporty.
I just assumed that was the coke thinness going on that he had.
So in classic small-town high school fashion, he meets the one other weirdo there. That's Richard, who's originally from Kentucky.
We got to meet 2 other weirdos, maybe even 3.
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
You're counting James twice, right?
So Richard and Tom were smart, but they were terrible students. After becoming fast friends at Sanford High School, they end up running away together and jaunting around the East Coast. They end up setting a field on fire in Alabama, getting arrested, and then shipped back to Delaware.
Yeah.
That's where they send the criminals. At this point, Richard convinces his mom that school's just not for him. And he decides to save up some money by working at, wait for it, a porno bookstore.
Wow.
That was definitely in Wilmington.
Yeah. So hold on. He says, Mom, I'm going to drop out of high school and I want to work at the pornography store. And she says, great. I'm glad that I just spent like a mortgage payment on your education.
Yeah, seriously. Tom, on the other hand, he goes back to school at Sanford. He eventually follows Richard up to New York. This is a couple years later. They reconnect in Manhattan's Lower East Side. Now, in case you haven't visited Manhattan recently, the Lower East Side is rather posh, or at least hip, and it has been now for couple decades. But back then, it was a crime-ridden, which also meant extremely cheap, neighborhood just starting to get populated with artists and bohemian types looking for a cheap life in the city. So this is the late 60s. Andy Warhol's hosting parties at the factory. His crew are helping pave the way towards merging the music and the art scene, and they're slowly but surely moving all the cool people farther and farther downtown. Our 2 heroes have a tabletop printing press and launch a poetry magazine. They really know how to not make money. Richard Hell has apparently been dabbling in poetry and publishing for a few years at this point. He was already getting some of his poems published in places like Rolling Stone, and he was actually starting to build up some cred in what I guess was a still around poetry scene in New York. Verlaine, handsome devil that he is, ends up dating Klaus Oldenburg's ex, who's 15 years older than him. Now, Klaus Oldenburg is the artist who makes the really big statues of everyday things like the huge pencil or the bow and arrow on Embarcadero in San Francisco.
Yeah, real visionary.
He's a famous artist, though, and the point is that fling got the guys into the art scene and got them invited to some cool parties, even when they're like 18, 19.
So Tom Verlaine had like a sugar mama, essentially?
Basically, yes.
So he was 20 and she was 35?
Yeah, something like that.
And established.
Very established and hip.
Not like a 35-year-old drifter.
Correct. Not a drifter.
Like me.
You're not 35.
Let's touch on the music scene at the time. In terms of young hip music, we kind of have 2 camps in this 1967, 1968 era. There's experimental types, and there's leftover folkies. And punk music is just around the corner, but here's an interesting generational connection that I don't think we make enough when we talk about punk, especially coming out of a place like New York. It was only a couple years before this moment, in 1965, when Bob Dylan stepped on the stage with an electric guitar and an electric band and got booed and called Judas by the folk purist fans. And he, in response, told the band to play it fucking loud. And guys like Verlaine and Hell and other early punks were very inspired by that. This middle finger to the establishment attitude. Telling the band to play it loud despite the protests of the audience, that is punk.
Yes.
Combine that with a love of poetry that's already in place and a romanticization of the beat poets, and you're starting to get the ingredients for the scene that is just now starting. Let's call it art rock. This is the time of the Velvet Underground being the coolest thing in New York that no one really outside of artistic circles cares about. And remember that with Velvet Underground and Andy Warhol, the initial concept was to bring high art into pop music, which was considered low art at that time. So Warhol's kind of leading the charge. And with that, other artists, established artists, are starting to see that pop music's an interesting vehicle in which to explore some of these artistic ideas. So there's this melding of different worlds happening. So the guys are hobnobbing with people like Patti Smith, who at the time was doing poetry readings. This is before she gets into music. And they are working at a hipster bookstore. And while they're there, they meet a guy called Terry Ork, a scenester connected to the Warhol crew, who was thinking pretty much about a project very similar to what Warhol did with the Velvet Underground, which is to say to have his own band to manage and manipulate to his own artistic ends. So he's the one that encourages them to start a band, and he promises a rehearsal space. They hadn't really That thought hadn't really occurred to them before.
That they were going to need to rehearse?
To play. Richard Hell does not play an instrument at this moment. But Tom, who plays
Okay.
guitar at this point, teaches him the bass.
Of course, as one does when you're like, we need a band fast. You have no musical talent. What are you going to do? You're going to play the bass, yes.
And at this point, of course, they realize they need at least one more member. So Tom calls up an old Delaware friend called Billy Ficca, who's the drummer on Marquee Moon. Now, the band they form at that time is called the Neon Boys. Richard Hell is the main vocalist, to your point earlier, Tom, that Tom Verlaine doesn't have an obviously great lead singer voice. And they're splitting the songwriting at that point pretty evenly. They even made some demos, but they never played live. But that said, Tom, during this time, is getting a sense of what he really wants to do. And what he wants is another guitar player in the band. So they advertise, they see some guitar players, they see people like Dee Dee Ramone in a pre-Ramones state come to audition, but unfortunately the band kind of just dissolves before anything gets started. And I should point out that even at this early date, Hell and Verlaine, high school friends, are already fighting over the creative direction. Sounds a bit like Verlaine is a perfectionist and Richard Hell is an asshole, I guess. I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, a perfectionist is just another way to say an asshole.
They might both be assholes. Fair enough. A quick note on their chosen stage names, which come into play around this time. They were already used to using nom de pens to publish poetry and stuff, and they thought it was cool. But this is where they lock in to Verlaine and Hell. So Hell is a reference to a famous poem by Rimbaud called A Season in Hell. And Rimbaud, famously, was lovers with another poet called Verlaine. So these two had quite the tempestuous 19th century relationship. Apparently Verlaine once shot Rimbaud in the wrist in a drunken, jealous rage.
Jesus Christ. This is before or after he trashed a small Oregon town.
Hawk ass in Oregon.
Anyway, I wanted to mention that I don't know that much about poetry. I don't know about you guys, but Bob Dylan does mention
Rambo, yeah.
Verlaine and Rimbaud in the same line
yeah.
in You're Gonna Make Me Lonesome When You Go. So that is in there, and he's referencing their relationship. But bottom line is these guys are very focused on becoming rock stars, and they passed the first test, getting cool names. So what comes next? Haircuts. These were very purposely thought about. I'm laughing as I say this, but it's true. Verlaine had a strong idea that each generation had a haircut that was iconoclastic, and that it usually tracked back to the haircuts that those kids had when they were 5 years old. So in their cases, that meant short hair, which also played against the hippies with long hair, but it was also kind of the little boy cut from when they were little boys.
Okay. So these were purposeful looks. 'Cause, I mean, I'm just even looking at the album cover. Not something I would go in and be like, give me the Verlaine.
It's a sort of anti-fashion generally. According to someone who dated Richard Hell around this time, she said they dressed like old men.
And wrote poems and probably smoked pipes and shit like that.
Probably, yeah. They were those guys. So now we got three components of the original television band. The last remaining piece, a guitar player called Richard Lloyd, is coming to us, and that brings us to everyone's favorite segment. It is called By the Numbers.
Yeah.
First number I want to throw at you boys is 1, as in the one and only guitar student of Jimi Hendrix, who has a connection to television. It's not Richard Lloyd. But here's the story. And I thought it was interesting, Phil, that you already brought up 60s guitar legends. I think you were thinking of California. But anyway, in the late 60s, Richard Lloyd was hanging around New York. He's a teenager. And he meets a kid called Velvet, who hung around Greenwich Village and always claimed that he knew Hendrix. And the story goes that the other kids mocked him for it, didn't believe him. And Richard Lloyd's like, well, I guess somebody has to know him, so maybe he does know him. And it turns out he did know him. He takes him to the show. He gets to meet Jimi Hendrix. He's hobnobbing with all these guys. Velvet Turner is known to be the only person Jimi Hendrix has taken under his wing as a guitar protege.
Oh, I've never heard of this guy.
And then he's getting lessons from Jimi, some amount of lessons. Unclear how much. This might just be the lore around this guy, Velvet Turner, but he definitely knew Jimi and took lessons from him.
Yeah.
And Velvet passes on everything he learns basically directly to his buddy, Richard Lloyd.
Interesting.
Yeah, you look up Velvet Turner, and he did have some kind of career. He sounds pretty similar to Jimi Hendrix, but he just never really took off, and then I think he left the music scene pretty quickly after.
He didn't have enough frills
Maybe
on his
not.
shirts.
Richard Lloyd and Velvet begin a long friendship, and like I said, Velvet passes on the guitar teachings from Hendrix to Richard Lloyd, which, despite television's connection to the New York punk scene, helps partially explain the next number, which is 1038. That's 10 minutes, 38 seconds, the length of the title track, Marquee Moon. This is a prog rock move, not a punk move. In fact, the shortest song on this record is just shy of 4 minutes.
In all honesty, there are punk albums the length of Marquee Moon, the song.
Yes.
Easily. Yeah.
Marquee Moon, the song, reminds me more of Franklin's Tower
Yes.
than it does of,
Totally.
Wanna Be Sedated.
Hell yeah. That kind of like soaring guitar solo, and they're like, let's just start the fucking song over again. yeah, right. Not long enough.
It's definitely more connected to the Grateful Dead. And some people were mad about that at the time, actually. But most enjoyed it. But regardless, I think it works. And you know why? Why does it work, guys? Our next number, 6. As in 6 hours a day, 6-day-a-week rehearsal. Television took a while, as we're going to see, to get to their debut album. But when they did, Tom Verlaine made sure the guys were practiced up right.
I like this approach. I like two things about this, right? One, I like that they're working 6 days a week. I'm not a religious man, but I like the idea that God rests on the seventh day. So should you, right?
Yeah.
I also like the 6-hour rehearsal time because, like, we've all been in rehearsal spaces. We've all been in recording studios. If you get 4 really good hours, that's a great day. So like 6 hours a day, I think it's a good realistic amount of time to like, hey, we're going to be in the space, we're going to be working, right? Whatever that means for the day. I think that's a good realistic amount of time to commit.
I can't remember since high school the last time I got a good 4-hour practice in with a band.
Yeah,
It's been a long time.
You got to take breaks for sure. I think what it tells me is, well, 2 things. One is that some of the stuff on the record that might come off as improvisational whimsy is actually, for the most part, very planned.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, we're going to talk about in the story, they played most of these songs for a couple years before they got this chance. So the other thing that I think it tells me is that Tom Verlaine knew enough to go, this is my shot. So let's bust our ass and really make it count.
Yeah.
I will say that the experience of listening to the songs, it is very, they don't ever seem lost. And they're meandering songs, so they don't seem lost.
I
in
agree.
the songs
I think that's
ever.
well said, too. Like, they sometimes take a while to get where they're going, but they do go there with a sense of confidence and a sense of direction.
What word did you just use to describe the songs?
Meandering realm.
Do you know where I'm going with this?
I know exactly where you're going with this. Yeah.
You son of a bitch. So, audience, some years back, we had a fun little office contest where we made playlists, and the prompt for the playlist was a single word. And somebody would throw out a word like meander, say.
Hypothetically, somebody will not name names here throughout meander.
And then people would submit songs for the playlist blind, and the person who threw out the word would then judge which was the winner. It was just a silly little game to mix playlists for each other. And I remember at the time putting Marquee Moon on the Meander playlist.
Yes.
For one Tom.
Yes.
And he said, this song isn't Meander. You definitively said those words to my face.
I did actually, say those words to your face.
What do you have to say for yourself?
Yeah, I still think I was right. Yeah, but still. I still think I gave you the win on that one because you had, what Van Morrison song did you have before then?
That I do not recall. But every time I hear Marquee Moon, I feel the sense of meandering, and it enrages me to this day. This must have been 10 years ago. Okay. Where was I? So,
Bringing up old grievances, Rob. That's where you were.
Speaking of careful planning that eventually pays creative and financial dividends, we are so thankful that you are listening right now. We really have fun doing this, as you can see, and that includes the hard work or the research that goes into making these shows every single week. We appreciate you being here to receive our banter and factoids and grudges. And if you want to support us just a tiny bit, it's totally free. Join the Patreon community right now. Debate this album right here in the comment thread. The post is up right now. Lots of other listeners are in there voicing their opinions, their favorite tracks, or yelling at us for our terrible takes or our mispronunciations of words or our vocal fry. Take your pick, audience. It's worth it. It means a lot to us to have a community over there. So please, if you're enjoying listening to the show every week, join up for free, get in the conversation. All right, now back to our story and to Richard Lloyd, who is a total scenester. This dude's first time on stage ever is getting invited up by John Lee Hooker.
Wow, what the fuck?
How does one do that?
All through this guy, Velvet Jones, who introduces him to Hendrix and all these other cool scenesters. And they start going backstage and chatting these guys up. And Velvet's in with them, so Richard Lloyd is in with them when they're like 18.
How much must that have pissed this dude, Velvet Jones?
Velvet Turner, sorry.
Velvet Turner. How much it must have pissed him off that he legitimately knows Jimi Hendrix and nobody believes him. And he's just like, no, really, I take lessons from him. Like, shut the fuck up, Velvet. What the fuck kind of name is that, you loser? Just like,
Right.
I'm the coolest person you know by far.
They're like, no, you're not.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of what came
But
across
I
in the
am.
story, is that Richard Lloyd being the only one that believed him is what made them immediate best friends.
Yeah, I can see that.
So anyway, he's been cultivating a cool guy image for a while. And even though he leaves New York for a little bit to travel, when he gets back, he meets Terry Ork as well, who introduces him to Richard Hell and Tom Verlaine, who recently had their band, the Neon Boys. And this is right around the time when the CBGB anecdote would be happening. CBGB's opens its doors in 1973. Keep in mind, it was already a bar with a different name, but it was a rebrand. Television forms with Richard Hell, Richard Lloyd, Tom Verlaine, and Billy Fica that same year. So basically they added Richard Lloyd to the old Neon Boys lineup. And I even read that these guys helped literally build the stage at CBGB's that the bands played on.
Interesting. I mean, having no money and having to do manual labor to, get a couple of free drinks, that
Yeah.
checks out as a musician. definitely.
Totally does. So, as described, they were playing Sunday nights. More and more people show up every week, and then more and more bands start popping up. The Ramones and Blondie both form in 1974, for instance. And here's something. An early review of a television show, we already cited one, but there was another one I found. Loud, out of tune, and pretentious as hell. But guess who did like them? Cool people like Patti Smith. And at that time, again, she's got a reputation as a poet who's just starting to dabble in music. She actually starts up a relationship with Tom Verlaine.
Yeah.
This guy's quite the gigolo. Guess who else sees them in 1974? Keep in mind, this record doesn't come out till 77. Bowie sees them at CBGB's in 1974 and calls them the most original band I've seen in New York.
Yeah. And they didn't immediately get
High
record
praise.
contracts thrown at them.
It's very strange that their debut album is still 3 years away. Now, we're going to talk about some of the reasons for that. They turned some options down. So they are getting attention from labels, and television's rise is in tandem with the rise of CBGB's as a very, very cool place that out-of-town cool people are going to, right? And they get a manager, Danny Fields. He's the guy that's credited with discovering the Stooges and MC5. He also managed the Ramones. So he's a dude, right? In 1974, they get the opportunity to make some demos with an up-and-coming record producer from the hipster British scene. And that guy's name is Brian Eno.
Oh,
Yeah, I read this.
Island
yeah.
Records foots the bill, or perhaps has some kind of development or holding deal with them, but this does not result in an official record deal. Now, stories vary a little bit as to exactly why that is, but for certain, Verlaine was very clear he did not like Eno's sound. He said it was too cold, too clinical for what they were going for. So, just a side note, turning down Brian Eno as a producer is a hilariously bad move.
yeah. But also, it shows that Tom Verlaine had a real fucking point of view.
Yeah.
A real opinion.
Agreed.
Yeah, and you got to keep in mind, too, Eno's not Eno yet. Eno's the same age as these guys at this point.
That does make a difference.
He is kind of the new it guy. He's just left Roxy and released his first solo record at that point. So Tom said he was just a little too wacky for him. At one point, he suggested suspending their amps from the ceiling for some reason. And Tom's like, I just want to sound like a rock band. So the Eno demos become kind of mythical. They eventually see release on some box set in the 90s, but I listened to them briefly. They're definitely a less dangerous sounding band, but it's not that different, to be honest.
Yeah.
But the sessions are apparently a major breaking point for Richard Hell and Tom Verlaine, the old friends. Hell was erratic. Drugs were almost certainly a factor. And Hell was kind of the non-musician in the band. The other guys are dialing in. They're getting more serious. They're getting more musical, really trying to get chops. And Hell is just like, I don't even think that's the point of this. I don't want to do that.
In my research, that is one of the things that stuck out to me as either the dumbest thing in the universe or the most punk thing in the universe. That, like, you're the fucking bass player, man. It's really not that hard to get, like, pretty competent at the bass and just steadfastly refusing as you watch your friends get better and be like, no, I'm taking a stand. I'm going to suck at this instrument. It's like, dude, come on.
Yeah.
Man.
I mean, to be fair, it did work out for him. He is kind of a punk legend because in 1975, he leaves television, and probably not coincidentally, within a few weeks of the New York Dolls breaking up, right around the same time. So he ends up forming a band with a couple of those guys. They're called the Heartbreakers, not to be confused with Tom Petty's band, which formed a year later. That band is also short-lived, but Richard Hell then goes on to form Richard Hell and the Voidoids. And, this is where Richard Hell departs from our story, but a couple quick notes. And I do think he's a legend, or he's certainly the punk soul of the band Television. Much more about attitude and energy than about musicianship. But it's worth mentioning that his song Blank Generation played in those early television sets, but ultimately recorded and released under his solo project, Richard Hell and the Voidoids, is considered a punk classic. And lastly, the famous oral history of punk music in New York City is entitled Please Kill Me. It's named after a homemade T-shirt that Richard Hell wore on stage with Television. And I have read this one. It is a very cool read. I would definitely recommend it.
I mean, that's certainly a statement of a shirt.
So he is a bit of a punk godfather, and in that sense, he was right, even though he didn't make it to Marquee Moon.
Yeah, no wonder he's the guy in the band that I liked the least in this story so far.
So to replace him, they get a guy called Fred Smith, the founding bassist of Blondie. According to Smith at the time, Blondie was like a sinking ship, and Television was my favorite band.
That's a very bad financial move for him.
It was, but we haven't gotten into the whole history of Blondie, but I think they still had to go through some iterations before they locked in and had hit records. They're still a ways away from that, but by all accounts, for the Television guys, it is a real lock-in moment. They now have 4 people who are semi-serious musicians to hold things down, and it makes them feel like they can dial in the sound they're aiming for.
That's what we needed on the chat. We just had to drop John, and then we could have really
Just
locked in.
one swap.
Get a competent bass player. Yeah, that was the only problem for sure.
Yeah.
So in 1975, Television released their first single. It's called Little Johnny Jewel. It becomes an underground hit. But guess what? It's like 7+ minutes long, and it goes across 2 sides of a 45. Thus, there is no B-side. So this is Verlaine's choice, and even his band members do not get it. Richard Lloyd considers quitting over this choice of single.
If you can't even fit your single on one side of the medium, you're
That's a tough call.
The title track, Marquee Moon, is the single from Marquee Moon.
Yeah, I heard that there was like a 3-minute radio edit. I didn't look that hard, but it didn't sound interesting.
When they originally released it, they released it as a 12-inch with the stereo mix on one side and the mono mix on the other side. And I think later it got split up across a 7-inch as a single track.
I mean, it's the best song on the album, but it's not a single. There's not really a lot of singles on the album.
Point is, they've been playing for a while. Now they finally lock in with the lineup we get here on Marquee Moon, but they still don't have a record contract. Arista Records starts pursuing them, and Alan Lanier, founding member of Blue Oyster Cult, did some demos with them.
BOC.
Which Verlaine admitted that he liked a lot more than the Eno demos, but he still insisted on finding a label that would let him, wait for it, control the entire process.
Yeah.
So I also think they were wary of competing directly with Patti Smith, who had just released her debut record on Arista called Horses, which is also on Dimery's list, and Verlaine and her were dating at the time, so that might have been a factor.
Yeah, that's a bitch move, buddy.
So in August 1976, they finally signed with Elektra, which promised Verlaine he could produce, as long as he agreed to be paired with a seasoned engineer. But, foreshadowing, it also promised a second record within 1 year of the first.
Ooh.
Now, Verlaine didn't want to get boxed out by a big-name producer, so he ends up enlisting a guy known for really solid engineering. His name is Andy Johns, younger brother to Glyn Johns.
I was going to say, yeah, known for being a Nepo baby. Is that like
Well, Andy was no slouch, though. He had worked with the Rolling Stones recently, and Verlaine really admired the warmth and live band loose feel he got with him, but I think he sensed that he hadn't really officially produced anything yet. He was just the guy who was good at dialing in the sounds, and that's kind of what Verlaine wanted. So speaking of sounding loose but actually being really tight, we talked about how much they rehearsed for this. Again, I think Tom Verlaine sensed that it was one shot at the gold. Richard Lloyd mentioned around that time that they weren't amazing musicians, but that they had the will to become great. And that, gentlemen, was the problem with the chop. Now, in the process, they ended up junking a lot of the material they had been playing. Because keep in mind, they've been a band for like 3-4 years. They have a lot of material, and they really go through this process through that deep rehearsal of whittling it down, cutting the fat.
What's the best 39 minutes?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. They want it to be powerful. The recording itself happens over about 3 weeks in A&R Studios in Manhattan. It's a rundown older studio that had a lot of history, like Coltrane recorded there, but it was considered a budget recording at the time. And just a few notes about, because again, they sound, it's hard to think of the context. They sounded really new and different at the time. They were already media darlings leading up to recording anything, let alone their debut record. But when a guy like Andy Johns, who's part of the old school, comes in, he is just confused. He says it took some time to figure out what they even wanted, and eventually he's like, oh, you guys want to sound bad like the Velvet Underground.
Yeah, my boy Andy knows what's up.
There was also an anecdote about how Andy did the initial mic setup on the drums without Verlaine's coaching or comment, and then they listened back to one of the first takes, and it sounds pretty much exactly like John Bonham's drum sound, and the drummers in the control room like, sounds pretty good. And Verlaine's like, no, take this all down.
Give me one SM57 hanging from the ceiling, pointed down at it.
Yeah, but put 7 of them on the hi-hats. So some of these songs, interestingly enough, are take ones, or at least takes where it wasn't clear that they were even aiming for the final take. That is the case for the final version of the title track. At the end of that take, Billy the drummer was like, cool, I'm warmed up now, let's do a real one. And Tom's like, nope, that's it.
I mean, he was right, that's it.
Now, there were some overdubs, but not a ton. They were definitely going for a live band feel. Richard Lloyd doubles almost all his guitars across the record. I don't think you can hear it that often. You hear it at places.
Sometimes there's like a chorus effect, but I guess what I'm hearing is that's not a chorus effect, it's a double.
Yeah, it's not a chorus effect. It's a double on everything, yeah.
Interesting thing to do. And tedious, especially when the types of stuff that you're playing is not chords. You know, it's a lot of lines that he's playing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that leads you to the realization that it's not improvised, that it's all very written and planned, which is not how it really comes off. It feels meandering, if I may say.
Oh, fuck you, Rob.
So there was also a couple weird things like Andy Johns swinging a mic around like a lasso while Richard Lloyd played Elevation. Like, I can't hear anything there.
Yeah, but hanging the speakers from the ceiling, that was a bridge too far. But you lasso that mic up there.
But for the most part, Verlaine was pretty much in charge of the production, right? Marquee Moon gets released February 8th, 1977, gets released a month later in the UK. Tom Verlaine gets a co-production credit. But like I was just saying, it does sound like he was pretty firmly in charge of the creative decisions, and Andy was mostly there as a facilitator. And it is a critical success. Rolling Stone calls it elegantly jagged art punk. Critics in both the US and the UK like it, even if they disagree about exactly what category it belongs in. But the coup is that the single, the aforementioned 10-plus minute title track, charts in the UK, and they land on the cover of NME.
No shit.
10-minute single. Can't imagine.
This leads to a lot more interest in the UK than the US, but unfortunately, they weren't able to capitalize on it because they were booked already to open for Peter Gabriel on a bunch of dates in the US.
No.
And this is Salisbury Hill Peter Gabriel, and the audiences were not into it.
No. That doesn't seem like a smart move on the part of, like, I'd see why they took the gig, but, like, that doesn't seem like a smart move on the part of whoever was the promoter putting that together.
Yeah, and it just kind of sounds like they felt like the record company mishandled them a little bit or didn't know how to handle them. They couldn't jump on this UK thing. They did end up touring in the UK later in the year with Blondie, and they were much better received. But the record never, ever charts in the US, never really takes off. And in the end, it sold about 80,000 copies.
That's shockingly low, I must say. I mean, it's not the most accessible music in the world, but for as revered as it is.
Yeah, it feels extremely influential. It's one of those cult classics. I don't think it's that hard to like if you like rock music with a little edge. It's not that crazy, you know?
It does seem, though, like the reverence for this didn't seem to start until the 80s or the 90s or 2000s even, right? Like the semi-mainstream.
I will go ahead and submit that I think that it is the lack of anything catchy or singable or like really repeatable or like in terms of choruses and stuff like that. that's just what makes people remember you and be able to say, oh, remember that song? It goes kind of like this.
In a different way, though, because there's almost no effects, it's kind of timeless.
Yeah.
It's hard to date because it's just like I put a microphone in front of a guitar amp, and that was the sound we had that day.
I do think that's a big part of it. You can't place it exactly in a decade. And, of course, what happens to the band next is a factor, too. They quickly record the follow-up album, Adventure, within a year because they're contractually obligated to. But this time, they skipped all that rehearsing. And for what it's worth, they were working with material that hadn't been road tested in anything like the same way. So Tom, at that point, takes full control. That record fails to inspire excitement amongst critics. Even though I listened to it this week, it's pretty good. It's not, I understand why it's not as edgy or cool as this one, for sure, but it's pretty good if you like this one. And television break up within 3 months of that second album, coming out in 1978.
So from the release in February of Marquee Moon to them breaking up is what, like 18 months?
Yep. So Verlaine and Lloyd keep playing, releasing solo records. Billy Ficca played with The Waitresses. Do you guys remember that band? They had that track, I Know What Boys Like.
I know what guys want.
Yeah. Billy Ficca is the drummer on that track.
What if he made more money off that single they did off of television?
Seems likely.
Now, eventually, I should say, they reconnect. They record a third television album all the way in 1992, but it also doesn't reignite any interest. They continue to be a cult band that have inspired a lot of people without being overly successful. Near contemporaries like Talking Heads were definitely inspired by them, as we've said. And as we've already mentioned, you can hear a through line to the garage rock revival of the 2000s, The Strokes, many others, right? But sadly, that did end up being the last television record. In January 2023, Tom Verlaine passed away after a long battle with prostate cancer.
Ooh, not a great way to go.
So this wraps up our little Delaware story. Listen, Delaware doesn't have a lot of musical heroes to claim, but I do think Tom Verlaine is our musical hero.
I mean, I'm taking him over George Thorogood.
I don't dislike George Thorogood, by the way. I think his songs are stock, but I appreciate the energy he brings to them.
I think it's Live Aid that there's a George Thorogood performance at Live Aid, and he shreds.
He
pretty
does. I remember, Rob, I think you might have gotten me a George Thorogood record for my birthday a while back, and the liner notes are a description of the guy who I believe ended up producing the record, talking about hearing about there's this band coming, and he was in Massachusetts, and he hears that there's this band coming, and he wants to go see them. And as he's walking up to the venue, it's like rocking fucking loud. He's like, yes, this is amazing. And he walks in and he is the only person there. And they are just shredding, just going as hard as they possibly can. He was like, I need to record this band. These guys are great.
I agree. I think they're cool. I think you have to think they're cool, though, you have to kind of separate them from their cliche persona, the bad to the bone stuff. It's one of those instances where a guy did such a good job of branding himself and his sound that it just has appeared in too many places and it just sounds hackneyed. But the reality is it was new and fresh at that moment.
Well, I don't know if Dan was new and fresh at that moment, but
I'm not signing on to Bad to the Bone, but I think some of those recordings are a lot of fun and they sound like a cool band.
If somebody was like, I'm going to give you $50,000 to put your song in a fucking Ford commercial, I'd be like, whatever, man, take it. I don't give a shit.
Absolutely.
I mean, I feel like they put that in like toothpaste commercials.
They do now, yeah.
Okay, so with that story out of the way, let's get into talking about some songs, gents. What do you think?
Let's do it.
Sounds great.
First up, we're going to introduce the first song on the record. It is called See.
First song on the album. I like the way it starts. I just
All
think
that hard pan.
Well, yeah, listen. The hard pan of the two guitars actually works.
I think it sounds like an engine revving up. I think it makes sense as the first song.
Yeah, it sounds very cool. Yeah.
I just think that I see no evil. It's not good. It's just not good. It's underbaked, and I think that this is one of those, albeit relatively rare instances where the live reception probably was to the detriment of the recording of the song, because I could see this getting a good crowd reaction, but on sterile tape, it doesn't sound like.
Yeah, that's an interesting take. I don't know that I agree. Like, I do like the way it revs up. I like the way it kind of announces itself with the rhythm guitar, and then that, like, I guess what's basically you're saying is like a stacked
mono guitar, right? It was doubled.
It is double, but I was just gonna say they're killing it. The arpeggios, the thing that's like responding to his vocal. I think that's a really cool, well thought out part. I hear what you're saying a little bit, Tom, that the hook is not amazing and that it probably would have been really cool to hear that crowd like, shouting it back at you and kind of really emphasizing those stops. But that would be cooler, but I still think the song is an effective single. And honestly, if I had played this record sight unseen, I would assume this is the single, but it's not.
I would not have assumed it was a single, and I think that, yes, minus the crowd shouting it, that chorus just seems underbaked. Listening to the song, I think the pre-chorus is great, and if the pre-chorus had just been kind of the chorus and they just cut back into the verse, because everything else in the song, I will agree, is fantastic. I love the way that they just approach guitar. I like the way that they approach guitar in general. It's not strummy strum. It's a lot of filling out chords or implying chords, you know?
Yeah, in that way, it's very jazzy. Like, I definitely saw some reviews calling this punk jazz, or later descriptions of the music as being punk jazz. And I do see what you're saying, and I agree with your description there, where they're outlining the harmony more than they're, like you said, strummy.
Yeah,
There's very little of that.
Almost more than jazz, although I can hear jazz in this guy's playing. I think the biggest guitar antecedent is Jerry Garcia.
Totally. Marquee Moon does feel like if the Dead went proto-punk.
There's a lot of this like climbing scales and like falling back down and like withholding notes and building tension. That's the guitar player really makes me think of. And clearly there are elements of jazz in Jerry Garcia's playing.
Yeah.
I just, again, and I hate to harp on it too much, but I feel like building tension works so much better when there's like a good chorus payoff. And so that's probably where the band fell down commercially, is that there wasn't that big chorus payoff.
Yeah, that's fair.
Well, even something about the way you presented it there, it made me immediately think of Violent Femmes.
Yeah.
I think Television is a little more ornate and Violent Femmes are a little more direct. But like Violent Femmes have choruses and they're fun, right? And that is a big difference.
Well, I think of those, they're connected through nervous energy.
Yeah.
And something about the singing.
Yeah, and there's like a DIY undergroundness that they both have.
Lack of polish, certainly in terms of the presentation, maybe, but not the recording and not the playing.
Yeah.
But I would say that's also true for Violent Femmes. Like, I forget the name of the bass player for Violent Femmes, but he's amazing.
Yeah.
It's high-level execution.
So I do have one complaint, and this really jumped out to me when I was listening on headphones. It's the hi-hats.
Oh, they're so fucking loud.
They're cranked, dude.
Yeah.
Why?
I don't know.
It's probably just bleed from the snare, maybe? But
should have stuck with that John Bonham mix.
Yeah, I should have.
Yeah, I need more bass drum, bro. Yeah, I thought that was a little weird, and I kept getting a little bumped by that because he's kind of got, I think this drummer is pretty jazzy.
Yeah.
And he has a little bit of a Stuart Copeland approach to hi-hats, and so there will be these times where he jumps out. I'm saying it makes the problem more noticeable because he kind of jumps out on the hi-hats and does a lot on them in a limited section of time.
I remember when we were recording We Want It All for the Chop, and I was playing drums at the time and talking to, this is back when we were going to that recording college, and one of the guys who was engineering over one of the many sessions was just like, I fucking hate hi-hats. They're so hard to record. They're all over everything. They kind of have this like weird messiness to them, and if you don't do it right, it dominates everything. And I think that this is an example of it kind of dominating everything.
Interesting, yeah. Didn't we listen to a band recently that had no cymbals in the drum tracking?
What band was that? Oh, they went back in and they redid the cymbals. That was Slayer, maybe? They talked about that on one of their first albums. They had to do everything without the cymbals.
I remember that too, but I thought there was another band where the engineer was like, I hate cymbals. There cannot be cymbals. Now I can't recall which one it was. We'll have to look at it.
I kind of vaguely remember that as well.
Listeners, this is a baton death march through 1001 albums. You cannot expect us to remember all of this.
I definitely can't remember what happened last week. Okay, let's move it along to the next song on our focus list. This one is called Frick.
That's Grateful Dead and Talking Heads vibe, which is like is moving in opposite directions in time.
It's the coolest song on the album.
This is sinister cool. I think this is the best mixtape pick for sure.
And this has the greatest delivery of any line on the album, where he says, I start to spin the tale. You complain of my dick. Shun. It's amazing.
Yes. That is
I
a
pat
great
my
line.
head up and I was like, what did you say, my dick? It's like, oh, shun.
Like I
Okay,
just snuck that in there.
Yeah. Also, that opening guitar riff or that main guitar
So
riff,
creepy.
it's so cool and
Yeah.
crunk.
Yeah,
It
totally.
really reminds me of a Phil lick.
Yeah.
I can picture you playing that and getting a big grin on your face right after you land it.
Like this is what I'm gonna play.
The
Yeah.
guitar, that could just be kind of like shit blues, you know? Like that opening guitar riff. Bow, bow, ba-da-da.
It sounds really American.
I'm talking about the, you know.
I was just thinking of the whole song, like the intro section specifically. It just feels very American compared to maybe some of the other things we've been listening to recently.
Yeah.
Uniquely American.
I love the ramshackle background vocals over the "Give me friction." Like they're not good, but they are
yeah.
perfect.
Also, the way it hits that 5 chord immediately takes me to Cities by Talking Heads. I feel like David Byrne heard this and was like, okay, I like this part a lot, you know?
More praise to the guitar player, but I'm gonna play you a clip at 141 when the line is "My eyes are like telescopes," and then the guitar plays a line that sounds like a telescope.
That's his telescope sound. It's
Yeah,
pretty
it's
good.
pretty good.
It's like he's like elongating it.
Yeah, exactly.
go.
Just a little surf riff. I love that kind of stuff.
I would say that there's a lot of over singing in this song from Verlaine, but I dig it. I think it's the delivery helps, but it is definitely he's putting a lot behind it. He's not trying to hit the notes. He's trying to give you a feel.
Well, we alluded to it, but the fact that this is a one-off and not a band that you had to follow over 5 or 6 records or some kind of long evolution makes that more acceptable. You sort of get less tired of it mentally and emotionally for that reason. He's giving it his all, man. This is his shot.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, he made a great album, but I don't know if he would look back and say that, yes, I achieved everything I wanted to achieve.
Well, he's dead.
Certainly not financially. Well, yes, but only recently. It's not like he died in 1978 or something like that.
Yeah,
you know?
when did he die?
2023.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize it was that recently.
Yeah, and the other guys are all still alive.
I feel like I knew that when it happened.
Even Richard Hell, Please Kill Me. He's still alive.
Not a man of principles, then.
I think his song is great. We already, I think, said it, or you said it, Tom. The title track is the best track, hands down. But this is number 2 for me.
Yeah, this has a coolness to it and a digestibility that the other songs sometimes lack, because I think the chorus actually works on this song. And I also really appreciate that they give you what is oftentimes in less good or cool or interesting songs, the sort of singer delivers a line and then you get a lick from the guitar player after the line.
Yeah.
Singer delivers a line, you get a lick. Like that can be done in a lot of stupid bullshit stock ways, and this does not.
Yeah,
feel
yeah,
that.
no. They use call and response differently, but it's definitely a pretty straightforward old school technique.
Yeah.
But like, they make it new again.
I think they're just into being jagged, having jagged edges. And that comes across in the guitar choices and the singing choices and the other rhythmic choices that they're taking.
And the hi-hat mix.
and that fucking the hi-hats are cracked again. Maybe the fader was busted on Sold Out Studio. There's like nothing I can do. Okay, let's keep it rolling here to the next song on our focus list. It's called, let's just start with The Way They Fall Into the Groove at the top.
Love it. It still catches me off guard.
It's a trick, but it's such a good trick. It's a masterclass in building something unexpected rhythmically.
Yeah.
Each new element is adding a new context, and your ear is trying to catch up. And in fact, I believe what they're doing, right, is they're shifting your sense of where the one is with
Yeah,
each new instrument
yeah.
that comes in. So you're always left off guard by the new instrument.
And it isn't really till the bass and drums lock that you're like, that's definitely the one now,
Yeah.
right? Like,
The guitar comes in, you assume that's defining the measure. Then the bass comes in, you assume that's defining the measure. It's not until the drums kick in
Yep.
that you actually have it defined and realize those other things are all on off beats.
So the thing is, the bass could be defining the measure, but
Yeah.
it goes bodo, and you assume that the second note is the one, but the first note is actually the one, but it feels like it's a lead-in note. And so it's very, very smartly done.
every time this comes on, every time I listen to this week, I thought, if this was on the next Wilco record, I wouldn't have
Yeah, I
missed
hear
a
you.
beat. Like, wouldn't have missed a beat.
No, definitely some of that Ghost is Born era Wilco was kind of like this for sure.
I mean, coming in with I remembered how the darkness doubled.
Such a cool line. I'm not sure what that means, but I
Doesn't
believe
mean
but I
anything, but
believe
it's
it.
great.
But I believe it. Yeah.
Lightning struck itself. I was listening to the rain. I was hearing something else. None of it means anything. It is amazing. That was my main takeaway of actually digging into the lyrics. I'm like, these are nonsense lyrics and they're perfect, a la David Byrne.
Yeah. Well, they're like surrealist, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes poetic.
Yeah, the Cadillac pulled up to the graveyard. Pulled out of the graveyard. It's great. It's a great line.
So again, we're in more dead than punk territory. We've been saying it. But I'll just say about the runtime of this song, it always captures my attention.
Yeah.
It's like a great movie. If I catch Goodfellas on TV, I'm now watching that movie to the end, and this song is like that.
Yeah.
I love how the guitar solo starts off so unassuming. You have no concept that is going to go to kind of where it does.
You're talking about like the extended one,
Yeah.
which I assume is Verlaine, the one that feels more improvised.
Yeah, but that is, I believe, both of them. I'm talking about the long solo.
Yeah, well, there's like the dueling section at like 3.5 minutes, and then there's like when it feels a little more improv to me, which I guess starts probably around like 6 minutes.
That's the one I'm talking about, where they stretch it out.
Yeah.
And it starts off very unassuming.
Agreed, very unassuming.
It's kind of like dun, 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 dun,
Yeah.
dun. Like, oh, okay, that's kind of
Mostly because the other guy sounds, I don't want to say better, but like more technically.
maybe more purposeful.
There's a lot of bad notes in there.
Yeah. But if if you keep, obviously if you keep going for another 4 minutes, it really does go somewhere in a pretty powerful way.
Yeah.
Totally.
It pays off. Yeah, that's the very dead and arguably jazz-like thing they're doing, is they're kind of hammering the bad notes long enough that they become good.
And they're consciously starting out in like a low energy place, maybe even uncomfortably low energy.
Yes.
Because like they want to give it the full ramp.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to give them credit too, even though, yes, they do technically restart the song, they rebuild the groove in reverse, which is a cool just little trick.
Yeah. Drums, bass, then guitar. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I love the song. This is a fantastic song. I've been a big fan of the song for a very long time. But they were not doing themselves a lot of favors with the rhythmic cadence over the chorus. It does not mesh with the lyrical cadence over the chorus, and they're very discordant. And so it takes a while for you to wrap your head around it, and it's not the kind of thing that's like, oh, instantly memorable, I'm going to sing along to it.
Yeah, it has a frantic vibe for sure.
that-
Like
Just that
Herky-jerky.
Dana, like
It's aggressively undanceable.
yes, yeah.
Yeah, and to your point about what even is the chorus, I'm always thinking it's when he says the title of the song. But another thing I took note of, they have this super long tune, and then they end it in a pretty non-obvious spot, which would be right before supposed chorus would start.
Yeah, pre-chorus at yeah, that's a great line. They probably looked at that and they're like, "What's the strongest thing to end the song on?" It's not the chorus. The chorus is not the strongest.
Right. Fair enough. Yeah.
I don't know, 10 minutes and 38 seconds, the engineer might have just been like, it's the end of the tape, bro. I think we got it.
Yeah.
No, Verlaine never would have stood for that.
I think it's badass, and I think it goes in does it get a podium in over 10-minute songs? We've talked about a few lately, close to the edge.
That's a good question.
Echoes, obviously, but
Yeah. I mean, it possibly, especially because, at some point you want some variety on that list, right? If you're looking for like a top 10 list, top of 10-minute songs.
I'm assuming live Fish tracks.
Yeah, there's no count.
No.
And
Yeah.
things that are jammed together like Franklin's Tower and Slipknot and stuff.
Yeah.
Not necessarily counting, right?
I don't know. We could debate this.
If only we had time to debate music.
I would say the Franklin's Tower Slipknot thing, I would count that as one, almost exclusively because that's the way they would perform it.
Yeah, that's
a fair point.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah.
fair point.
Yeah, but by that logic, are China Cat, Sunflower, and I Know You Ride are different songs?
I don't know.
Okay. That's been enough of Grateful Dead Corner. We're going to move on to the next song on our list. It's
Not Odd Time. That's just herky jerky, and it's like something no man can count.
I don't
that,
think
right?
they
That chorus
changed
there.
the time. No, I think they just jump the beat so hard that it's intended to shock you.
And it does. And it completely ruins the flow of the chorus.
They're like, just when you thought you were getting into some kind of groove.
Yeah. So I'm guessing, Rob, that this was your low point on the focus list.
Actually, no. But I do think the record starts to lose some speed inside, too. I do think that's true. I like this song. but you start to notice that they are repeating some of their tricks. I think on the positive side is that makes the record vibey and internally consistent, right? You get this off-kilter groove, they lock it in, they have this weird undanceable herky-jerky thing. The hi-hat's still getting on my nerves, but
You could be describing a lot of songs in this.
that's what I'm saying. But I still think this is a good song. I like this song. I think it's a successful song.
I mean, I think most of the songs here are successful. This probably would be my low point. It's just, or at least my low point on the focus list. I don't, I could probably, Venus is suspect as well. But yeah, it's just okay.
It's okay. I like the A minor to F as like just a chord change to base a song on. I've always liked that's a vibey chord change.
I kind of like it's like spaghetti western meets New York City's Answer to Miami Vice sound at the beginning.
Yeah.
Like I like it. There's just a weird tone they set.
Yeah, that's a good call. I was getting that bass part reminds me of watching The Detectives.
No,
in a
I
cool way.
definitely at the intro you feel like Elvis Costello could come in. A different drummer and Elvis Costello would come in.
Fred Smith does some good work on this song particularly, but on this album in general. I find his bass playing to be pretty good. But let's not go fucking crazy and say that it's like watching The Detectives. That's one of the coolest fucking bass and drum songs.
Yeah,
of all time.
okay.
Let's not go too far.
I agree.
guys.
The Attractions are badass. There's no doubt about that. Yeah, I like it just fine. I wanted to say that this is an example, in case you're wondering about that guitar doubling thing. I think in his solo, you can really hear the guitar double effect. I think it comes in around 3 minutes.
We'll ask you guitar players, how fucking annoying is it to double your guitar solo? It's gonna be
That'd be really annoying. Although I'm immediately fascinated with the idea because I haven't done it, and I'm like, what would that be like?
Well, it just depends on your approach to the thing. If you've literally been playing that on stage consistently,
Yeah,
then it's really not that big a deal.
I agree. Potentially,
But if you improv'd it, it would be very hard. And if you improv wrote it, like that's sort of my approach usually, then you'd have to go back and learn it, so it would be a hassle.
It just feels like the margin for error on execution on a solo is way lower than on picking through an arpeggio or something like that. There's a lot more feel involved.
It's definitely an odd choice, because I think of doubling as like, yeah, it's going to give the guitar some power. When we've done it in the past, it's been you'll get a different frequency range, right? Maybe you use the same guitar, maybe use a different amp, and you'll kind of scoop one out in the middle.
beef it up sonically a
beef
little.
up the mids on another one.
Well, the way it's used here, though, I feel like is often more for like almost like a very subtle chorus effect. They're moving it in the 3-dimensional space a little, but so it's more felt than heard sometimes.
Yeah, it is effectively doing what a chorus pedal does.
Yeah.
In a much more challenging way.
Yeah. It's like subtler and also significantly more difficult to achieve in the studio.
And I'm sure for the effort, probably not actually worth it.
So I thought the interesting note about this song was that at the time it was debated whether or not, I don't know if this is what the band intended or not, but elevation, don't go to my head, could be construed that he's really saying television, don't go to my head.
I did think that that's what they were saying for a while. Not this week, but previously.
So that might have been kind of baked in. And spoiler alert, it did go to his head, and they dissolved quickly, as we mentioned. But I thought that was an interesting little tidbit. Okay, we can round it out here and go to the last song on our focus list. It's called Guiding Light.
Verlaine sounds great when he comes in on this track, like when his voice enters, but I almost want an African American female. The stage they say, I love the way this is a sonic departure from the other songs into like 70s R&B sort of thing. It was very unexpected. Or at least, at the beginning, it moves on from there.
This is where I got the Mick Jagger vibes.
Ooh, that's a
from
good
him.
call, yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I can hear it, definitely.
Yeah.
But I can hear it in the other songs, too. This kind of pouty vocal approach.
Yeah, like he's singing and he's doing kind of a good job, but he also kind of sounds like a bitch.
So I called this my low point because I think they thrive in darkness, and this is daytime music. This is too hopeful for them.
I mean, it gets a little weirder as you get into it, but I
does,
agree.
it does.
It starts pretty optimistic.
They eventually change to a minor chord, and then they kick back to a major, so it kind of sounds triumphant, like they got somewhere. No, I still think it's a successful song. Like I said at the top, to me, this is a 10 of 10 album, and I will happily play it all the way through.
Delaware thrives in darkness.
That's right. That's the message I want you to take with you.
Yeah, those Delaware nights, baby.
To me, there's something about, because it's all the things you guys mentioned, somewhat of a different style, or they're going for something different, but they're filtering it through their touchstones, right? So by the time you get to that solo at around 3 minutes, it sounds very 80s cheese to me, which I guess charitably you could call ahead of its time.
I never got cheese, personally. I think that what I liked about this song is that they build nicely while the singing is happening. And I think in a lot of other songs, the singing happens, then the build happens. They're like almost two separate things. And this seemed to build in concert together a little bit. And also, like, Fred Smith does some really nice bass work at the beginning of the song.
Yeah, the bass is cool.
Yeah, the bass throughout is cool, but it is highlighted at the intro again. It's a nice intro. It really like sets up well. Although, Rob, I like your comment that they thrive in darkness. They're more like street rats. They come out at night.
Yeah, indeed. But is thriving in darkness enough to be a must listen in this here life? What say you, gentlemen? We've gabbed enough. It's time to vote. Tom, does this belong on the list?
This is quite an easy yes for me. I gave a yes to the Velvet Underground, even though I didn't like the album. I feel the same reasons for giving a yes to this, and I liked the shit out of this album. I have liked the shit out of this album for a long time. It's a great album, not just because 2 of the 4 members are sons of the First State.
Indeed. Thank you, Tom. And Phil, what say you?
This is also an easy yes for me. I mean, I love its ongoing contradiction and sound. The angular meets humble DIY sounds. I think its impact on bands from like Radiohead to War on Drugs to Wilco is pretty undeniable. And I think if this came out next week, it would still sound pretty fresh.
So piggyback on your comment, I know I already talked, but to piggyback on your comment, because we can't stop talking about music, I feel like almost any album with a point of view always sounds fresh. And this album has an absolute point of view.
It's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is Rob here, and it's, of course, an easy yes for me as well, for all the reasons you just described. But just to piggyback off what you just said, Tom, it feels like a single person's vision. It feels like a band that knows what they are and what they're trying to achieve. And as we talked about in the story, has road tested these songs, trimmed the fat, despite having 10-plus minute run times. I know how that might sound to some people, and I totally agree that it still sounds modern. And really I'm saying when I say that is nothing else actually sounds like this. You can draw lines in a lot of directions, which is the mark of a great band that's had great influence, but I really don't think you can get this on any other record. So, Television, and by proxy, Delaware, you have now been lauded to the high heavens. You are on the list. Delaware is a must-visit state. That's right. You heard me.
Rob's putting it on the map.
We like to kid about Delaware. We love it, but we also know its failings. Okay, I think we are going to move on from Television and get to...
George Thorogood fan club?
He's probably somewhere drinking alone. Just, Is he not? Wait, is he dead? George Thorogood?
I think he's
Oh,
alive.
good. I don't have to quit drinking. That's great.
Okay, first up, we're going to read from the old mailbag. First up, we have Paul, who writes in, "Hello, humans and Phil.
There we go.
Great.
I'm a bit behind in my binging, so I just finished your episode on OK Computer. In it, I believe it was Marty who said there's a word that describes misconstrued lyrics. If you haven't already been informed by someone else, the word is..." Phil, do you know what the word is?
Is it Mondgreen?
That's correct, Phil. Our writer wrote an article about it a few years ago, which he passed on to me because he's a grammar nerd, and luckily he found another grammar nerd. And in it, he references several common examples of Mondgreen, including "Excuse Me While I Kiss This Guy" and "Hold Me Closer, Tony Danza." Phil, you want to tell the audience why you know this term?
I learned this because it is the name of a fish festival in Delaware
Yeah.
That's right.
last year.
That's right. You hear that? The great and mighty American institution called Fish deigned to play a festival in Delaware.
And they Fish, in retrospect, probably highlighted some of their less
Yeah,
intelligible lyrics.
And one of their
At the
songs
show.
is famously, the song "You Enjoy Myself" famously has words that were, this is probably not the same thing, but like misinterpreted
Yes.
Italian that they turned into
Yes. They
English.
definitely did. You
Yeah.
enjoy myself.
Oh, well, of course they did. Come on.
So they played for 4 days. They're going to
Fish and One Trick Pony. You Enjoy Myself every night, as we all know.
But would the Mongreen be more like the moment dance, the moment ends?
Yes, exactly.
I think that would be more what that refers to from Fish, who appreciate Delaware. All right. Thank you for that, Paul. Now we're going to do a little roundup of feedback on our Lloyd Cole and the Commotions episode.
Can I pre-fuck all these people?
Pete writes in, subject line, "I was ready to be heartbroken. Hi, chaps, loving the show. As a proud Scot, I was quite disappointed you didn't obliterate Belle and Sebastian, Teenage Fan Club, and Franz Ferdinand as mercilessly as I'd hoped. All Scottish groups.
Yeah, and at least one of them's good.
But Lord Cole of the Commotion, sacrilege, chaps, just sacrilege. Kudos to Bradley, our listener guest, for manning the barricades during the onslaught from the barbarian hordes.
That's what you're hanging your fucking hat on, is Lloyd Cole.
And Lloyd, by the way, he's a great guy. I complained to friends on Facebook that he'd canceled a gig in Australia near where I used to live. And I woke up the next morning to a DM from him offering me tickets on his guest list for any of the other gigs that were going ahead.
Wow.
That's awesome.
That is awesome of Lloyd Cole. It also shows that probably only like one or two people actually complained about it. He was able to reach out to them individually.
Fair. We did, as predicted, get a lot of feedback that we were terribly wrong about Lloyd Cole, but I just have one more here in the mailbag. Nick writes, "Hey, complainers. It was a moment in the Lloyd Cole episode that stopped me in my tracks and forced me to finally write in. I got quite excited when Tom mentioned that Lloyd was from Buxton, as that is about a half hour away from where I live, and a very pleasant town in the beautiful Peak District. I got more excited when he mentioned that Lloyd went to Runshaw College, as that was the local college to me when I was growing up. But the clincher was when Tom mentioned that the college is in nearby Uxton, as that is the village I grew up in and my parents still live in.
There we go.
It is a name that no one can pronounce correctly, even Brits who have never heard of it. I'm pleased to say that Tom was no different.
Oh, fuck. I thought he was going to say I got it right.
He pronounced it, as I just did, Uxton, which is better than the usual mispronunciation of Euxton, but I feel I just have to inform you that it is actually pronounced Exton, with a silent and superfluous U.
That's fucking stupid. I'm sorry.
So, listen, we love hearing every little thing you think. If we got it wrong, if we got it right, your personal stories with these records, send them on over to 1001albumcomplaints@gmail.com. And we have but one thing left to do today, and it's a little bit special, but I'm going to throw the mic to Tom to tell us about the album we're going to be listening to next week.
Thank you. There has been a lot of speculation on the fan boards about this last listener album pick. There's been a lot of really off guesses thrown out there, and I am happy to say that listener Sula, winner of the contest to pick an album because she purchased a copy of Enterprise by the Beverly Crushers, shameless plug, decided that her entire goal with this was to punish Adam by forcing him to listen to 69 love songs by the Magnetic Fields.
Oh, that is the perfect choice to punish.
It
Adam.
really is.
She's really got his number. I agree.
It's like, I know you're going to hate it, and there's so much of it to hate.
Well, and it's like it's so beautiful, but also Adam's gonna hate
There's
it.
there's a lot of filler on there too, but there's a lot of great stuff.
Well, I want to say I'm excited about that for the reason of punishing Adam, and also because I love 69 love songs. I think it has some of the best modern songwriting on it. So very excited to get into it. I wanted to throw out to the fans, if you are already a fan of this record, some of us that know the record, including Sula herself, what we're going to do is we're going to trim down that 3-discer to a tight 1-disc playlist. So if you want to play along with us, you can go through those 69 songs and get it down to a tight, let's say approximately 44 minutes, and send it on over. We'd love to see where the overlap is, how people agree or disagree. It'll be a fun little exercise.
I think the best part, Rob, as you described, was Adam's reaction. Listening to it the first time, he's like, no, there's actually 69 fucking songs on this album. That's not just a clever title. What the fuck?
It's like I thought that was a joke.
It's a triple disc, bro.
3 CDs.
And for anyone who maybe has not heard it before, I'll just prep you by saying it's bloated on purpose. That's part of the fun.
Yeah, they were definitely writing an album from an album title. They started with 69 love songs.
Exactly.
Like, I mean, I got like 26 to go. Let's fucking crank some of this shit out here.
But I do think it's great. Spoiler alert, Adam will be arguing the other side, I assume. So listen this week to 69 love songs. Thank you so much to everyone who participated in the listener raffle, bought a copy of Enterprise, or even streamed it or supported it in any way. We really appreciate it. We're definitely going to do that again soon. And I know you all have been waiting for this one. Adam's had a busy schedule this summer, so we're going to slip it in right as the summer ends next week.
Very excited.
Okay, we are going to sign off here tonight live in Delaware, the heart of all that is good and holy in this world. For everyone at 1001 Album Complaints, I have been Rob.
And I have been Phil.
I have been Tom. Bush!